Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Rube, that was one heck of an introductory press conference. 53 minutes. It hit the over.
Yeah, I felt stupid. You asked me before Lurie started if I wanted the over or under at 5 minutes. I'm thinking he's just gonna say a couple things about Doug, say a couple things about Nick, and then we'll get on to Nick. And after 30 seconds, I messaged you and said I want the over. I really misjudged that one. You should always take the over with Jeff Lurie. You'll be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, we're starting to realize why those interviews go 12 hours. This is the Eagle Eye podcast with Reuben, Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. There was a lot there. We're going to kind of go through it all. I think we have to start, and we'll get into his assistant coaches and his philosophy and some of what Jeff Lurie said. But I think we have to start with Carson Wentz. It's the biggest question surrounding the team. And I know some people are annoyed that he was asked so much about Wentz, but that's kind of the deal right now. It is by far the biggest dilemma facing this franchise. And there are other ones for sure, but they have to figure out the quarterback situation. There were a lot of questions, not a lot of answers.
Yeah, and I guess, that's to be expected. I mean, there's not a lot he can say. He kind of surrounded it. I don't think he was asked about Carson excessively. I think people kind of phrased the question different ways, and I thought they were all fair questions. He didn't commit to Carson, and he did not commit to him. Same with Jalen. So we don't really know any more now than we knew then. It would have been, on the one hand, it would have been nice to hear him say, I'd really like to have a quarterback by the start of training camp or something like that. But then if he doesn't, then people are going to say at the start of training camp, well, you said you wanted this and now you don't have it. So I can understand being vague on that. The reality is, if they're going to trade him, he can't come out and say we want to trade him. And if they're going to keep him, or if they can't trade him, or if they don't try to trade him, you can't put yourself in that box now. You can't, because who knows what's going to happen in August. So I kind of understand it. It would have been nice to hear him kind of a little more effusive about Carson. I mean, because you can praise him and you can praise Jalen, you can praise Carson without putting yourself in without committing to anything. Say, listen, Carson's had some great years in this league. I wasn't here last year, so I don't know what happened, but the Carson Wentz that I've seen play as an MVP caliber guy. Frank always spoke really highly of him. There's ways to say something without saying anything. He chose not to. There's not really a whole lot of takeaway there, other than what I thought he could have said.
Sure. And if you didn't listen to the press conference, we can kind of give you the bullet points of the Carson conversation. He was asked if it was a stipulation of him taking the job, and he didn't really answer it. He said, we have two quarterbacks, and the old saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. But that's what he said about that. I asked him about the relationship between Carson and the team, if it's fixable. And he said he couldn't speak to that, but he had a good conversation with Wentz, and he knows Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, has spoken to him as well. He was asked directly if there will be an open competition in training camp. He said he couldn't say that yet. Then he also mentioned that, the old every position is an open competition, which isn't true. There was not an open competition last year Josh McCown didn't come in here thinking, man, I'm going to win this job. What else?
Maybe I'm going to be the head coach.
Maybe. He was asked very directly if Carson Wentz will be back, and no surprise here. He said, I can't answer that. And he can answer that. I mean, that's the most truthful thing he could have said, because he really has no way to answer that. I don't think anyone knows. But it is important now. We've had how many of these press conferences where the Eagles have had a chance to vouch for Carson Wentz, to say he's our guy, like they had the previous 5 years, and they haven't done it. And that speaks to me, that speaks louder than anything. They're clearly keeping their options open. And a lot of this is really in Carson Wentz's court.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we keep hearing, we've heard Jeff Lurie and Howie and now, and Doug and now Nick all talk about Carson. And we haven't heard Carson say anything except he's happy for Rodney McLeod being a Walter Payton Award nominee. That's the first time we heard from him since halftime, since after the Green Bay game. So it'd be nice to hear from Carson and know what's going through his head. Not because it would be a good story, but because I'm really curious what he's thinking. I really want to know. I think every Eagles fan wants to know what's going on in his mind. Did getting rid of Doug resolve anything? Did hiring Nick? I think the fact that Carson has talked to Shane Steichen is interesting. And he didn't just talk to Sirianni. He talked to his OC. I don't want to put too much into that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm not sure if there was no chance, if Carson had his mind made up, I'm never playing for the Eagles again, no matter who the coach is. I'm not sure he's talking to the offensive coordinator. You want to know, like, what are you going to be running? What kind of stuff do you have? What's your vision for the offense? How many yards am I going to throw for a game? That kind of thing.
I do want to point out, though, that Sirianni said a lot of these conversations with players are not football related. It's get to know you calls. So it might have been Shane Steichen like, hey, do you have kids? Or, it might not have been super football oriented.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that he would have talked to Carson and just limited it to his, their kids and their dogs and, seen any good movies lately. I would think at some point Carson's gonna be like, what kind of offense do you run? I don't know that, but I'm guessing. It had to do to some extent with football, but it could be, they could have just been talking about their favorite Neil Young albums. I don't know.
Maybe. So that was, I don't really have much else to add on Carson. It was obviously the biggest topic of discussion, but we didn't really get anywhere. I don't think anyone really expected us to get anywhere, but it's kind of, we had to go through the process on Friday. Those were important questions to be asked. What did you make overall of Nick Sirianni? Because he was nervous. I think it was clear he was nervous, but it's understandable in some respects that he's nervous. What do you make of it? And does it worry you or bother you that he was visibly nervous during this thing?
Yeah, I thought he started out super nervous. Like, I felt bad for him. Like, I thought almost like, go take a few minutes and calm down and and come back out or something. I mean, I was, but I thought as he went on, it was funny because depending on the question, like when he was asked football questions, he calmed down a little bit. He was clearly a lot more comfortable talking about, like, when he was asked, what kind of offense you're going to run, or, that stuff like that. He was clearly more comfortable with that when he was asked about his coaches than talking about Carson or stuff that he just didn't know how to answer. And I'm sure he's never been in that position before, having to answer questions that he couldn't answer. It's not an easy thing to do, to stand up there and be political and be and do it smoothly. I mean, some people are really good at it. I mean, Chip was freaking master at it, and he didn't last 3 years. So I don't think that there's any correlation between how a coach, I mean, I remember walking out of Doug's presser, his first one at the NovaCare, and just thinking, I mean, he was more, I don't even know if it was nerves, but he couldn't articulate anything. He really had trouble just kind of putting together a sentence. And then he won a Super Bowl, 24 months later. So I don't think there's a direct correlation between how you come across in a press conference and whether you win games or not. I do think that there's a certain, if you want to win the respect of a new team, you have to stand in front of that team and speak with authority and speak with confidence and speak with command of the room. So how much of a connection there is between how you present yourself in a presser and how you present yourself in front of the team, that's the big question to me. How is he going to be nervous when he stands in front of the room? I don't know the answer to that, but in general, you feel a little more comfortable with a guy who's got that presence, who's got that command. But again, I don't think there's a direct, oh, he was nervous, they're going to go 6-10. I just don't think I didn't like some of his answers. But I did think he got a little more comfortable as it went on. He didn't seem ready for some of the questions, which were kind of obvious questions. So that surprised me a little bit. I was really surprised. He said he hadn't watched tape he was asked about the roster. He said he hadn't watched tape. I mean, I'm sure he has. I mean, that's something you do before you go in for the interview. And he's had a week since he's been named, over a week. Right? What was it, last Thursday?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure he watched film of the Eagles before he interviewed. So, you come out and say, we got some really good players on this team. We got Dallas Goedert, we got Miles, we got Fletcher, name 4 or 5 guys. I think Josh Sweat can be a really good pass rusher in this league. I really am, we got some young guys ready to take the next step. I really like what I've seen. But don't say I haven't watched. That didn't come across well to me. I don't know. I don't think it really means a whole lot, but you like to see a guy who shows that he knows something about the team. And I didn't really get that from him.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I will say devil's advocate a little bit. If you start naming players, you forget one. And hey, he didn't name so-and-so.
Well, he's going through his notes. I mean, he clearly had notes on his right, which
I think those were notes for his statement, which I think probably added to some of his nervousness. And honestly, the nervousness doesn't bother me on it, like not really at all, because I think he's obviously going to be much more comfortable in a locker room talking to players than he would be talking to us and having to answer tough questions. And I also don't think they did him any favors by putting him in an empty auditorium at a lectern, talking into a Zoom like that. And if he was nervous in the beginning, about 12 minutes into Jeffrey Lurie's opening statement, he had to be like, get me out of here. This is too much. It's a really tough situation.
Agree.
To be in. So if you watch that press conference and you feel like doomsday right now, I wouldn't feel like that. I think you owe it to this guy to give him a real chance here. I don't really take much away from the press conference and his demeanor. You can take away some stuff from the answers if you want, but his presence, we'll see how that goes. I think he'll calm down over time, and I think it'll help once he gets to know us a little bit better too. He's talking to a bunch of people who are asking him tough questions he's never met. It's not easy.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I mean, like I said, I don't think there's a correlation between how you come across in a presser and whether you win games. As long as they feel that he can stand in front of the team and come across like he's in command of the room, that's all that really matters. And, I
wish he just would have talked about biting kneecaps like just once, though. Just one kneecap, one time. That would have been ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I go back to Doug, and it was just a bunch of gibberish. And, he was, and then Doug got better in 2017 and then got worse again. By this year, Doug's pressures were, didn't make sense at all. So, I don't think there's a connection. Andy's pressers were not the most riveting things ever. But I mean, when you look at it, the two coaches who had the best pressers were Ray Rhodes and Chip Kelly, and they were okay, but even Buddy, like people think Buddy went up there. Buddy was terrible in press conferences. Ray Rhodes was the best. Chip was good when he wanted to be on certain topics.
Buddy would give you a one-liner.
Like once a month.
Yeah.
But those got so much play that like everyone thought he was sitting there, cracking all these great one-liners all the time. He had like 6 jokes and he just kept using the same ones over and over. And they were really funny. But anyway, I would agree with you. I don't think it's alarming. It was awkward. It was uncomfortable. I would think by his next one, And yeah, I mean, gosh, if we were all sitting in a room with him, and had a chance to maybe meet him beforehand, say hi, whatever. I mean, I asked my question. I tried to welcome to Philadelphia, just kind of like put him at ease a little bit. Like, we're not monsters, he's probably heard of the Philly media is going to eat you alive and all this crap, which is true. But
well, I know when they hired Doug, part of that interview was to bring him into the auditorium, and they had staff members pose as reporters and sit in the seats and ask questions.
Is that right?
Yeah, they did, to kind of prepare him for what was coming. It was either part of the interview process or they did it after he was hired. It was one of the two, and I can't remember. But I wonder if they did something similar with Sirianni. This is obviously a much different situation, being that it was virtual, but I'm sure they did something similar.
Yeah. Maybe they should have the writers practice asking the questions.
Wouldn't hurt.
But
yeah. I will say he had energy, and I like that. I mean, I think you can tell that he loves talking about football.
Yeah.
And I think that came across really clearly, and I think that'll come across clearly to his players. He's an energetic guy. He wasn't able to articulate it.
Yeah.
But you can tell he is excited, and I think he's going to bring some energy to the team. That's good.
Yeah, you can see why Don Slewinski liked him in the interview process, Dave. I mean, I don't want to make fun of the guy, but don't get the team president's name wrong. That
wasn't a great start. But those prepared statements are tough.
Yeah,
unless you're Jeffrey Lurie,
well,
and you live for him.
Yeah, he loves his prepared statements. I'm just, you with Lurie, you're always like, before we start, I just a few words about the evolving situation in Ghana. You never know what you're going to get. We traveled to Ghana back in whatever. But I wonder if it would help to have a teleprompter. I don't know if that is something they can rig up. I mean, it makes.
We've done it. Reading a teleprompter is not easy either. If you haven't done it,
we've done. If we can do it, Nick Sirianni can do it. I mean, yeah, come on. But yeah, I do think, and just from looking at the Twitter, I mean, I think it's 50-50 where people are like, what the hell was that? And other people are like, what? Cut him some slack, which I can understand both. I can understand saying, wow, he just wasn't prepared, but I can also understand. Definitely when he talked about, and he was still trying to talk too fast and get too much in there, but you could see when he was talking about football, he kind of like, okay, I'm on my comfort zone now. I can talk about that stuff. So, we'll see. What happened today certainly is not going to have any bearing on whether he's a good coach or not. Hey, all month long, NBC Sports Philadelphia presents Headstrong, Men's Health and Sports. Headstrong is a series about men's health told through powerful stories involving the athletes that we all love. Learn more on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com/Headstrong. Let me tell you about the Eagles fan cruise. It's time to look forward to your dream vacation. The Philadelphia Eagles fan cruise tickets are selling out quickly. The ship sails in March of 2022 for 7 days and 7 nights with Eagles fans and only Eagles fans. Book your tickets right now at PhiladelphiaEaglesCruise.com.
Expert reading there, Rube. That was good.
Well, after I, criticized,
I know there was a lot of pressure on you.
I can't blow the read.
All right, so let's get into some of the other topics from the press conference. Wentz was obviously the biggest one, but there were some other ones. He confirmed that he will be calling plays. First off, I just want to get your take. What do you make of that? We expected it. We expected that he was going to call plays, but it's a lot, and it's a lot for a first-time head coach. And Doug Peterson did it as well, but it's a lot for them on game days to be calling the plays and also dealing with the other duties that a head coach has on a game day.
Yeah, I can see it both ways, and Frank Reich hadn't done it either. So, I think there's something to be said for the the model of a coach being, and I forget who asked the question, but the CEO of the football team, just the guy that is leading the entire team and isn't worried about calling plays because he's talking to the defense, or he's talking to special teams, or he's over here with the quarterback. So I think there is, but I also think that if you're really good at it, then do it. We don't know what kind of play caller Nick Sirianni will be. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt and see how it goes. I memean, the guy certainly knows offensive football. It's interesting. I don't know really what goes into becoming a good play caller. I just, some guys are good at it, some guys aren't. There's so much, as far as keeping the defense off balance. I think you really have to understand defenses and be unpredictable and just constantly mix things up and understand how they're trying to stop you. And so, yeah, it's a lot, but I don't have a problem with it. And I wouldn't have had a problem if he came in and said, I just want to be the coach and not worry about calling plays on game day. Well, it's going to be my offense. I'm going to install it. It's going to be my plays, but Shane's going to call the plays. So I'd be okay with that, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, based on the reports out of LA, it doesn't seem like you want Shane Steichen calling the plays. So
yeah, that was just
yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I'm okay with it. I liked his point that a lot of the work as a play caller is done during the week, and that's true. I believe that because you really have to understand everything that's on your call sheet, and you have to understand beforehand the situations that you want to use these plays in. It's not like you're up there with a diner menu trying to flip through 8 pages and pick your play in 5 seconds. A lot of that thought process has to be during the week. You try to prepare for different game situations, and you have a menu for. It's not like you have your whole menu. You have a menu for your red zone plays, your goal line, your fourth down, all the situational football. And the best coaches have gone through all those situations in the week leading up to it. So by the time the game comes, as soon as the situation arises, they're like, this is what we're running. You have 2 or 3 plays in your mind. You pick one and you go. And
it's like the draft. It's like, well, we're not making the decision of who to draft on draft day. We've made that decision. We're just going off our board. And that's what people tell you. That work's been done. So we're not sitting there arguing about who to take because we've made those calls already. Which, if that's the case, I don't know why everyone uses their all 15 minutes. But that's another story that we'll talk about in April. But
I was trying to trade. What do you mean? I was trying to trade the pick.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
He was asked about his assistants. I guess we'll start with Shane Steichen. He said him and Shane see offensive football very similarly. Now, there are 2 trains of thought here. That's either a good thing or a bad thing. And I think it works both ways. It can be a good thing because you want to be you want to have that cohesion with your offensive coordinator. But the flip side of it is sometimes you want a dissenting point of view. You want your, maybe not the best example, you want your Pat Shermer to your Chip Kelly. You want someone else who can bring, I mean, I know that didn't work out great, but that was the idea behind it, was that you have
a great example because of that. Yeah. I mean, that was the appeal to Chip, and it was made a lot of sense. I mean, Pat was the old school, old time, back in the day type guy, and Chip was the high flying, riding the wave, new offense type guy.
And even Doug and Frank, to a certain extent, they were similar, but Doug kind of came from really a traditional West Coast system that had gotten altered over the years. And Frank Reich was kind of brought in to be the deep passing guy. We'll see. I'm really curious to learn more about Steichen and find out just how similar his philosophy is with Sirianni and then where it does differ, because I think it's going to differ at least a little bit. They have been together, but they haven't been together the last few years, and things change.
Right. And I think that's a positive that he didn't just bring everybody from Indy. I'm a big believer in different voices, different backgrounds, and it's always a concern to me when you take too many people from your previous place. Now, you want people that you're comfortable with and all that, and share your vision. So, but I do think it's important to just have, all these new voices and different ideas. And, you know, if you go into the room and everyone's like, well, this is how we did in Indy. Well, yeah, this is how we did in Indy, period. I just think you're limiting yourself. So, we don't know. I mean, we don't know who the running backs coach is going to be. We don't know who the receivers coach is going to be. And those are big hires. But I hope they're outside people. I think there's enough Colts. I think we're okay there, and I think there will be. I mean, he's kind of, unless he brings Mike Rowe back here, there's not a lot left. Maybe some assistant position coaches, but I'm a big believer in a lot of different voices and a lot of different backgrounds and even different philosophies, different age groups. Not everybody being the same age and coming from the same school. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there are positives and negatives for both ways to build a staff, because sometimes you put a bunch of different guys with different viewpoints in a room that never see eye to eye, and they get pissed off when they're not being listened to, which kind of we saw maybe a little bit last year when the staff was forced together. So I think it has to be kind of natural. Jonathan Gannon, very highly regarded, another young coach, but to me, that one, I know he's coming from the Colts, which is the same spot, but it seems like he would have gotten a defensive coordinator job even if he didn't come here. So I think that makes you feel a little bit better about him than maybe Steichen or Patullo.
Yeah, I think that's true. And one question I would have liked to ask, and I think I know the answer, if we had unlimited questions, I was really curious, how much autonomy Jonathan Gannon will have, and how much of a voice, Nick Sirianni is going to have on the defense. Is he a guy that likes to sit in on defensive meetings? Is he going to, is he going to work day to day with Jonathan Gannon, or is it just going to be like an Andy Reid, Jim Johnson thing, where it's like, it's your defense, you go do your thing, you take your guys and your staff, and you get ready over here. We're going to get ready over here. And again, I don't think there's any one right way to do it. Like any of these things, I don't think there's a right and a wrong. I think there's individual preference. I kind of get the idea that Jonathan Gannon is going to have a lot of autonomy in the defensive room, and I think that's good. Especially if Sirianni's going to be calling plays. He's obviously got a lot on his plate with all that. So I'm really curious about the rest of the defensive coaching staff, and I think hopefully we'll know some more in the next couple of days, and what kind of product Jonathan Gannon is going to put out there. It's like you said, he's a pretty highly regarded guy, and this team's always had like older defensive coordinators and younger offensive coaches. I mean, kind of the veteran, wise defensive, from Emmett Thomas to Jim Johnson. I guess Sean McDermott was a younger guy briefly, but Billy Davis, I don't know how old he was, but just like really experienced guys who've been around, and so it's kind of exciting to have a younger voice, younger approach on the defense. I'm curious to see what it'll do.
Yeah, and I think one of the big hurdles for a young head coach that comes from, and we've seen it with Doug too, or and Andy, many years ago, but when they become a head coach, they do have to oversee the entire team. And that's a big transition from being even an offensive coordinator, where you're really you're on one side of the football. You have to, you can give Jonathan Gannon a level of autonomy, but you also have to show that you're in charge of everyone, and I think that was something that Doug kind of struggled with early on, knowing how to do that. I think it's something a lot of young coaches kind of have to feel out. They have to feel out that process, and maybe it'll be a little easier for Sirianni than it was for Doug, because he knows the defensive coordinator, has a relationship with him. And honestly, the DC hasn't accomplished as much as Jim Schwartz had at that point. I mean, Jim Schwartz was a former head coach.
Yes.
So maybe it'll be a little more natural, but it's a big part of it, because when you sit in the locker room, hopefully, everyone's together in the locker room, Sirianni is going to be talking to defensive players too. And I think Doug really grew at that over his 5 years. that's something to me to watch.
Yeah. It just struck me, if you're a veteran player on this team and you watch that presser, I don't, I don't know. I don't know if I'm a veteran on the team and I won a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and I don't know. I don't want to make too much of it, but
yeah, but if you're a veteran player on the team, you've also gotten a phone call, and I think the one-on-one conversation with the head coach probably means more to you than
it's probably true.
Watching a press conference.
Yeah.
He was asked about Jeff Stoutland. He said it was a no-brainer to bring him back, and a big part of this is when Frank Reich went to Indy, he obviously brought with him a ton of tape from the Eagles in the Super Bowl year, and that's what they kind of watched, and that was a big part of them building their offense in Indianapolis, and they ended up with a really good offensive line there in Indy. But a big part of it was watching that Eagles team, specifically the Super Bowl team. So yeah, he watched Jeff Stoutland put together a heck of a line that year, and the work he's done here over his entire 8 years, really impressive. He said it was a no-brainer. He said the tape speaks for itself, and I'd imagine Jeff Lurie also said, hey, this is just a suggestion, but keep Jeff Stoutland. And a suggestion from the owner goes a long way.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this the other day. I think it's important for any coach to keep at least one or two, assistants from the previous coach, unless it's Rich Kotite and there's nobody worth keeping. I just think it's important to have that thread when guys walk into the building and they see, hey, there's Jeff Stoutland. It's still the Eagles. There's whoever else he ends up keeping, whether it's Mark Van Manuel or Aaron Moorhead or whoever. I think there's a lot of value in that. And especially, for young players at that position, like for Jordan Mailata to have Jeff Stoutland, it's incredibly valuable for his continued progress. If you brought in a new guy who doesn't really, he'll know the background. He was a rugby player, blah, blah, blah. But to not know exactly what steps Jordan Mailata has taken to get from that to where he is now, that would be a big loss for Jordan and for that O-line. But for all these guys, for Brandon Brooks trying to come back after missing last year, for Dillard going into year 3 now, who knows what his role is going to be? Maybe he moves to guard. For Lane, for Sua, for all these guys. Look at Jack Driscoll, who could, I think, is going to, a starting caliber player at some point in his career. For a 4th round pick, played really well when he played under Stoutland. So, and that's a position where there's a lot of, there's older guys who in the next couple of years aren't going to be here anymore. And there's younger guys that Stoutland has worked with that are going to be, a couple of them they would hope would be starters, whether it's, Herbig or whoever, but, or Sua. So I think that's important. And I think I'd be surprised if he doesn't keep another 1 or 2 guys from Doug's staff. We'll see.
Yeah, I think he will. I did want to bring up, and this can kind of lead us into a little bit about Jeffrey Lurie, but the idea of him relating to his players, he mentioned it a few times and how important relationship building is. These are a lot of the same themes we heard when they hired Doug Peterson. We didn't hear the term emotional intelligence on Friday, but it's still pretty clear that's what this is. They want a guy who can relate to players, who's the players coach. And that doesn't mean they're soft. That doesn't mean they're pushovers, but it means the players want to play for them. Andy is a perfect example, and obviously he's one of the great coaches in the league, but he's a really great example of a coach who can be tough at times, but players want to play for. And I think that's the balance you're trying to find. And that's kind of what Jeffrey Lurie said in minute 9 when he finally started talking about Nick Sirianni, was that here's a guy who can relate to his players, but can also give tough love when it counts. And he said not relating to players and not having that characteristic is a deal breaker as an owner. And my little alarm bell went off. Did yours?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. My inference there is that he was talking about Josh McDaniels, who doesn't have the best reputation.
Yeah, it's a hazy thing. I don't know. Every coach is gonna say that, they care about their players. I mean, I don't know how I don't know how you know as an owner or a hirer, I don't know how you really, other than talking to former players and talking to other coaches, how you really know. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns there. I don't know.
Well, I don't think there are. I mean, I think guys end up with reputations pretty quickly for how they manage their players. And I think they definitely probably listen to Frank Reich in that respect. I think they really trust Frank's assessment of how players respond to Sirianni. And look, I don't think the reputations coaches get over the years happen by mistake.
I guess that's true.
I mean, are there any examples of it's pretty clear cut.
Yeah, I just think, things change when you're a head coach. So I just don't know. I don't know.
I guess that's the one thing I'm really not worried about with Nick Sirianni, based on what I've heard, is that the guys are going to like him.
Well, let me ask you this. What is your biggest concern?
My biggest concern with him or the team?
With him.
My biggest concern with him is that he's not ready to take on all the responsibility of being a head coach. And with that, the play calling duties as well. It's a lot. It's a lot to put on your plate. And that's the one thing we just can't know until we actually see him deal with it. Now, my biggest concern with the entire team is he doesn't have talent.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I agree.
But too much on his plate. Too much on his plate is the one thing that worries me for a first-time head coach, and maybe he's ready to deal with it. But there's no amount of hours in an interview process that can tell you that. You have to find out, and we're going to find out.
Yeah.
How about you?
I guess just whether he's ready for this, and that's something you don't know until you see him in action. Is he ready for what he's about to face? And
which part of it?
I guess just the leading 53 guys, just leading that room, commanding that room. I'm not saying I have reason to believe he's not. I don't know that he is. I don't know. I guess there's just gut feelings that you have about different people, and certainly wrong as much as I'm right. And I'm not saying my gut feeling is that he's going to fail. I just don't know. Nothing I saw today, and I'm sure this is unfair, but nothing I saw today made me think, man, I want to play for this guy, and I understand that's not fair. And I give you that, but sometimes you watch a guy and you're like, man, I want to suit up for this dude. And I mean, that was my visceral reaction.
Yeah, I think you're right to acknowledge that's kind of unfair, because with 70 guys on the roster, I don't even know how many do you think actually watched that press conference or will watch?
No, I'm not talking about like when. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. We did stream it live, so I think most of them did. I don't know. I'm just right now. I'm just kind of soaking it all in. It's just my very initial gut reaction without even thinking about it. I'm not, and I'm the first to say what a press conference doesn't determine whether you're a good coach or not. But I guess I just let's see what's next and go from there. But today didn't tell me a whole lot. I just didn't give me much. So I guess I don't have a lot of informed opinions because today didn't really tell me anything. Is it, you know what I mean? I didn't learn anything about Nick Sirianni today.
That's fair. I think the one thing we did see was the enthusiasm. It was maybe misguided as he tried to explain things, but I think that's going to come across a lot better in a more comfortable situation talking to players. And everything we've heard of, that's honestly, it's the least of my fears with him, is that aspect of it. I think guys are going to want to play for him based on everything we've heard. To me, it's more the technical side of it. How will he delegate? How will he call plays? How will he handle game days? All the things we haven't seen him do as a coach, because he's never been a head coach at any level. Those are the things that worry me more than whether or not his players buy in, his players want to play for him. I think all that stuff you can tell based on those interviews with him, based on conversations with people who have worked with him, played under him before. It's just the technical side of it is my biggest question.
What did you make of his answer to my question? I asked him, because this is a league where, and we've talked about this, every Eagles coach going back to the 80s made the playoffs and won 10 games in his first or second season, and most of them in their first season. And I asked him about that, and he just didn't go anywhere near, I don't, it was just, I have to see who's on, we don't know I don't know the talent. I don't know this. I don't know that. I mean, I'd want a guy to get up there and say, yeah, I want to win now. I don't want to, I don't want to, again, I'm on the one hand, I'm saying it doesn't matter what he said, but I just wanted a little more. I wanted a little more. You thought he was enthusiastic. I wanted a little more enthusiasm for winning. Like, we're going to win. I want to win. Teams today can go 4-11-1 one year and go 10-6 the next year. And, this division is there for the taking, and we got talent here, and man, I can't wait to get started. I didn't get that.
Yeah, I hear you, but the whole thing was kind of wonky.
Yeah.
I almost give a mulligan for some of those answers, because look, I get that you should be better prepared. I get that you've had a week.
But it's not like a complicated question. When can you win? I asked him, what's your personal timetable that we can win, that we can be a playoff team?
Yeah, but does his failing to answer that question preclude them from winning?
No, but yes. I wanted a quote. I wanted a good quote.
I get that, but
no, but I guess I wanted to see some passion for, in his answer, I guess. I wanted to see, I'm not talking about busting up kneecaps, but dang it, Rube, we're going to win. We are going to win. You're going to be proud of this team. I just didn't see enough of that.
Okay. Doesn't bother me, honestly.
I know it doesn't. And
yeah.
I understand that. And I don't think you're necessarily wrong. It's just my gut reaction. That was just
honestly, maybe I was just happy to hear him talk after Jeffrey filibustered for 16 minutes. It was about 16 minutes.
Yeah. And
what did you make of it? Let's go through Jeffrey a little bit, because it was, I do appreciate him kind of explaining the process they went through, which is honestly very similar to the process he outlined when they hired Doug. They started off with 25 candidates that they really did their background on. Then they cut it down to 10. They interviewed those 10. And you can easily tell that the 10 they interviewed weren't necessarily coming into it as serious candidates, but guys they wanted to talk to. They wanted to get in a room with and pick their brains. He didn't admit that all the way, but
he pretty much did. He said, we're getting a lot more from them than they're getting from us.
Yeah, which is why he thanked them. And he did say the interviews can last 10 to 12 hours, which is excessive.
He said you take 7 to 10 hours.
I don't know. Maybe 10 to 12 was the estimated press conference time. But
I got to admit, I did doze off a couple times.
Honestly, it is funny because it's a little tough to really concentrate when Jeffrey Lurie is speaking, because it's kind of, it goes on and on and on, and then he'll hit you with something. You're like, wait, what did he say? It's
like that professor in college that you had who, he'll drone and drone and drone, and you're sitting there and you're thinking about like the party that night or your softball game later in the day, and you're in a completely different place. And then all of a sudden you hear, Reuben, do you have an answer?
Yeah, or it's like, this will be on the test. And you're like, what did he say?
Can you explain the question again? I didn't quite understand.
Yeah.
But
I'm trying to think of what else.
He was a college professor at Emerson. I'm sure some of those students have experienced that.
Yeah, I'm sure. So we talked about the process. He gave a special shout out to Deuce. He said they had spoken on the phone a couple nights ago, I guess. That was nice. He didn't mention Doug Peterson by name once, which maybe he felt like he didn't need to, because he already had the press conference about firing Doug already.
Maybe. I do think it's BS that Deuce had to leave to be prepared to be the head coach of this team. And, I don't buy that. I don't buy that he has to be, what do they call it? The boomerang effect.
I don't know.
You have to, like if you're working at a small paper in South Jersey and like the Inquirer tells you, you got to go work for a Metro, you got to uproot your family and your life and move to Chicago and work there for 2 years before you're worthy of us hiring you, that kind of thing. I'm not talking specifically that ever happened, but just they call it the boomer. Like you have to go somewhere else and then come back and be qualified for the job. It's
I got you. Yeah.
One of those corporate BS phrases that we like to use in our meetings, to get on the boss's good side.
I love our meetings, by the way, if the bosses are listening. I live for them.
I know you do. But yeah, the notion that Deuce has to be a coach with the Lions or anybody else to be qualified for this job. Yeah, I don't buy that. I think Deuce would have been a hell of a hire. I'm going into Nick Sirianni with a completely open mind, and there's a lot to like about him. But it was it was just interesting to hear Jeffrey Lurie speak. I mean, he said he's like my son and I love him. If you feel that strongly about him, make him your head coach.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But like you said, open mind with Nick Sirianni. Let's see what he does.
Yeah.
Anything else from this press conference before we shut the pod down?
Well, I don't know how much you want to get into what he said about Ghana, what Lurie said. I have copious notes here somewhere. No, we'll see. I mean, the next thing that Nick has to do is finish putting his staff together. There's a lot of unknowns because, there's no combine this year. There's no, there'll be pro days, and
there's no individual workouts either.
Yeah. Yeah. No individual workouts. So it's going to be all pro days. And, and then I think they get an extra mini camp, and we don't know the details of all that yet. We don't even know
if they're going to be mini camps.
Yeah. We don't know. We don't know anything about what this offseason is going to look like. Hopefully by the start of training camp, it's a normal training camp or close to it. Hopefully we're all vaccinated by then and we can all go down to the NovaCare and watch practice and talk to players. We'll see. There's a lot to go, but the next thing is hiring the staff, finishing the staff, and it's gonna be some interesting hires there.
Yeah, there'll be interesting hires, and of course, the quarterback situation is still looming large over the franchise. If you enjoy the podcast, as always, go ahead and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Give us a review, comment. We appreciate all that. If you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you too. That audience has grown. Please click like and subscribe there as well. Nick Sirianni, we've met him for the first time. We'll talk to you guys in the coming weeks about him as the staff comes together and we try to figure out what the 2021 Eagles are going to look like. For Reuben, I'm Dave. We'll talk to you soon.